Chapter 12, Section 2, 3 Levels of Emotional Adaptation. So how can all of us find the practical solutions to begin these initial stages of our own personal journey of emotional adaptation? At the beginning of this chapter, you will find a small diagram that will help guide you through these 3 levels. Level 1. Now that we know from the previous chapter that through certain independent scientific research studies on the brains of these very gentle and special Tibetan Buddhist monks, and through thousands of hours of focused attention, mindful meditation practices, these expert meditators began to easily access the working memory through these multiple areas in the brain that are associated with our working memory. And now that we know that, with the help of our working memory, we are able to effectively allow neuroplasticity to begin to voluntarily store new emotional information into our long-term memories. And now that we also know that a major principal solution that encourages the activation of voluntary neuroplasticity is priming techniques. This is how this combination, together with a brand new team of neuroscience experts, released, of course, from all ego emotions, can work together to find practical solutions to invent for us all some brand new focused attention, user-friendly, mindful meditation practices that we can all begin to adapt as a routine daily practice that will voluntarily trigger our authentic, altruistic emotions to activate a new gut reaction based on some brand new voluntary altruistic emotions. In other words, these will not be self-centered, narcissistic I am ego emotions that we discussed in Section 1, but instead, based on the principle altruistic emotions of empathy, loving kindness and compassion, positive thoughts and positive emotions, and peaceful thoughts and peaceful emotions, and generosity of our human spirit towards self, so that we begin to gain heightened awareness for all of the physical, mental, and ego emotional wounds and suffering that we have gone throughout our lives since early childhood. These brand new routine daily practices would need to become a disciplined daily routine practice, just like brushing our teeth each morning and night, because we mustn't forget that some of these expert Tibetan Buddhist monks practice these techniques for more than 44,000 hours and many years in order to begin to release and heal themselves from their own set of ego emotional wounds and suffering, and therefore we cannot expect this to be a quick fix, overnight transformation, unless we are willing to discipline ourselves and to spend every morning and every night practicing these brand new focused attention, mindful meditation practices. However, once achieved, level 1 is the most important level because it first re-establishes altruistic love for self. I firmly believe that we are all born with our advanced, highly evolved altruistic emotions because they all develop through our authentic heart and gut emotional senses throughout our early childhood years. But the only reason that our altruistic emotions do not fully develop in our adulthood to become our main and dominantly stored emotions in our long-term memories is because many of our different and more dominant ego, fear or hurt emotions start to suppress and take over control in our long-term memory throughout our childhoods and into adulthood whenever we are becoming upset, angry, hurt, in fear, or having any other different ego emotional wounds or suffering, and continue to be activated throughout our childhood and into adulthood, as we have already mentioned throughout the first half of this book, section 1. But our authentic, altruistic heart emotions are connected to our soul's journey, because we have not yet recognized that our heart and gut emotions become the seat of our childhood memories. And once our hearts become emotionally damaged at this very young, pure, and innocent childhood age, this then becomes the bedrock and foundation for all of our future stored emotional information found in our long-term memories. And this is how our long-term memories continue to recall this childhood emotional information throughout our childhood and into adulthood, because our memories can do nothing else. And, as mentioned throughout this book, all information stored in our long-term memories controls most of our behaviours, our thought patterns, our decisions, our reasoning, and most of our reactions. This is why we should all be a great deal more loving and kind towards ourselves, because we were all unaware that this was all going on throughout all of our different, very early childhood emotional events. Level 1 is the most important level of all of this brand new journey of emotional adaptation, because if we don't have empathy, compassion, and loving kindness for self, so that we can gain heightened awareness for our own suffering throughout our lives since early childhood, how on earth can we begin to gain heightened awareness and give empathy, loving kindness, and compassion, and generosity of our human spirit towards others? This is the reason that I was determined to find the practical solutions to be released and healed from all of my own old and unwanted ego emotional wounds and suffering, picked up throughout all of the different emotional events throughout my life since early childhood, so that I could live a peaceful, happy life, free from all of my own ego chattering and all of the ego noise pollution that my ego emotions tried really hard to get me to remain in. All of these ego emotional wounds and states of suffering that I had picked up and stored into my long-term memory throughout my life since early childhood. That is why, once I had found these practical solutions to re-establish and store my authentic, altruistic heart emotions to be reinstated dominantly into my long-term memory through thousands of hours of focusing my altruistic thought patterns on empathy, loving kindness, and compassion for self, positive thoughts and positive emotions for self, and peaceful thoughts and peaceful emotions for self. And most of all, generosity of my human spirit towards self. That is how I then began to gain heightened awareness for all of my physical, mental, and ego emotional wounds and suffering that I had unfortunately gone throughout my life since early childhood. And very slowly, after many years of daily routine practice, I began to release and heal all of my old and unwanted ego emotional wounds and suffering. And I can only describe what it felt like once I had achieved success, similar to the feelings of a young bird taking its first solo flight from its nest, full of emotional freedom, healing, peace, and complete blissful happiness within. And this is when I knew that these practices were highly effective. However, my new dominantly stored altruistic emotions now gave me great heightened awareness for the suffering of others. And that is why our altruistic emotions are associated with the emotions and behaviours of the collective consciousness. This is when I now wanted to move to the next level, so that I could focus all of my attention and all of my altruistic emotions and altruistic thought patterns for the protection of our earth and all vulnerable that belongs to all earth's nature, because I knew that without her protection our human lives will cease to exist. And this is when I was more than happy, willing and ready to move to the next level in my own personal journey of emotional adaptation, level 2. Level 2. There are nearly 8 billion people living in our modern world today, and each person has developed their own set of individual and different personal ego emotions, all different and in all different degrees of strength. Some have developed very mild ego emotions, some dominant, and some have developed very extreme ego emotions that have taken over control in the long-term memory. There are also many people all over our world today who have developed and are behaving with both their ego emotions and their highly evolved altruistic emotions at alternate times. There are also other advanced, enlightened individuals who have developed both ego emotions and highly evolved altruistic emotions, but have found the practical solutions to suppress, release and heal most of their ego behavioral patterns and instead behave more dominantly with highly evolved altruistic emotions, as we discussed in the previous chapter through the lives of these peaceful and gentle Tibetan Buddhist monks. However, as you are about to discover in the index, there is also another very special group of very special altruistic individuals who have developed a heightened sense of awareness for all other suffering and take action to volunteer their time and hard work through the emotions and behaviours of altruism, empathy, loving kindness and compassion and generosity of their human spirit, to all take action to help to protect all that is vulnerable and suffering that belongs to all Earth's nature in all different non-profit voluntary capacities in all different countries all over our world today, without expecting anything in return, no monetary rewards, no praise and no recognition. These individuals are some of mankind's most advanced individuals living on our planet Earth today, because they are not only protecting all vulnerable that belongs to all Earth's nature, but by doing so they are also protecting all of our lives, because without the protection of our home, our fragile planet Earth, all of our human lives will cease to exist, as we have already mentioned throughout Chapter 10. This is why our altruistic emotions are related to the emotions and behaviours of the collective consciousness. You can find details of many of these different non-profit Earth Guardians in many countries all over our world today, and all of their incredible voluntary work through many different links to their websites, blogs, articles, books, and many different scientific education vlogs that can be found in the index in Level 2, so that you can begin your own research, because many of us are not yet aware that we all owe our lives to this small, incredible group of enlightened individuals. But these are not the only enormous attributes of our highly evolved altruistic emotions, because this is how we can all also begin to live through a much more heightened sense of wellness, blissful happiness and healing within ourselves. Because we mustn't forget also that once we are functioning dominantly in our long-term memories with our highly evolved altruistic emotions, it will also be very difficult for any individual's extreme ego emotions to activate our own ancient ancestors' more aggressive genetic emotions that are found in our genetic memory, the amygdala. Instead, our highly evolved altruistic thought patterns would be sending out signals, and just like a boomerang, these waves of energy would return back to us and into our own material realities. In other words, our altruistic thought patterns, energy waves, would be creating our brand new material realities through the emotions of a heightened sense of wellness, blissful happiness, pure peace, harmony, and complete healing within ourselves, mass. This is how our advanced, highly evolved altruistic emotions can one day also allow us to experience this true path to enlightenment. Imagine if 8 billion people began to find the solutions to become dominantly developed in our long-term memories with these advanced, highly evolved altruistic emotions, so that we all developed heightened awareness for all others' suffering, and we all took action to help and protect each other, and all gave emotions of empathy, compassion, loving kindness, and generosity of our human spirit towards each other. This is when no person would ever need to lock their doors or windows for fear or distrust of each other ever again, and no person would ever need to be fully reliant on money for their own individual and close family's survival ever again, and there would be no more fear, distrust, and no more greed, conflicts, no more wars, no more exploitation, no oppression, no suppression, no separation, and no more destruction of our earth, and no more ego emotional wounds and suffering throughout our modern world ever again. Instead, we would all work together through these highly evolved altruistic emotions of the collective consciousness to all take care and look after each other, and all take care and look after all that is vulnerable that belongs to all Earth's nature, without expecting anything in return, no monetary rewards, no praise, and no recognition, just like the bee kingdom, that all bees work together for one purpose only, for the collective protection of the entire bee colony's survival. Imagine if all humans worked together for one purpose only, for the collective protection of the entire human colony's survival, through all of us volunteering our time to all work together for the collective protection of our fragile planet Earth, so that we all began to recognise that without her protection, our human lives will cease to exist. Below, you will find an excerpt from a short movie created through a small group of young environmental activists that set out to teach us all. Today, it's well and truly necessary to fight for nature, and in doing so, for the human race. We are balanced on the shoulders of a fragile giant, on whose survival counts that of every living species. Utopic illusions of a need for abundance of things are just repeated blows delivered to its clay flanks. Our next challenge, a sizable one, is to free ourselves from over-consumption, taking back the control of our resources in favour of a life-saving sobriety. We must provide for basic needs while paying better attention to the environment. Living in harmony with nature is becoming a political act, a strong gesture. There is still time. Confronted by the servitude in which we've become entangled, global consciousness is waking up. But now that we know that our working memory and these different types of priming techniques may be able to help a brand new team of neuroscience experts invent for us all these two brand new levels of focused attention mindful meditation practices, we still haven't yet discussed where our highly evolved altruistic emotions can be located in certain areas in our brain. This is because some of these advanced emotions, such as altruism and empathy, have not been so easy to locate by independent scientific research experts. This is because, as we have already mentioned many times throughout this book, our brains are highly complex, and neuroscience experts are now thinking in terms of complex networks in our brain rather than separate locations. However, to give us all clues to their whereabouts, we have to return back to some independent scientific research studies discussed in Chapter 6 to discover that many generations of women began to evolve more dominantly in the area in the corpus callosum. However, attached to the corpus callosum, this is when we find our first clues. The cerebral cortex, plural cortices, also known as the cerebral mantle, is the outer layer of neural tissue of the cerebrum of the brain in humans and other mammals. It is separated into two cortices by the longitudinal fissure that divides the cerebrum into the left and right cerebral hemispheres. The two hemispheres are joined beneath the cortex by the corpus callosum. The cerebral cortex is the largest site of neural integration in the central nervous system. It plays a key role in attention, perception, awareness, thought, memory, language, and consciousness. In more recent studies, there were found that through other independent scientific research, neuroscience experts identified that emotions of empathy is activated in areas in our brain called the supramarginal gyrus. This particular research study identified that feelings can distort our capacity for empathy, and that emotionally driven egocentricity is recognized and corrected by the brain. However, when the right supramarginal gyrus doesn't function correctly or have to make a quick decision, emotions of empathy is severely limited. And if we take the time to research where the supramarginal gyrus is located, we discover that it is a portion of the parietal lobe, the area that is also known as the Brodmann Area 40, based on the brain map constructed by Corbinian Brodmann to define the structures in the cerebral cortex, the area in our brain that we discussed earlier and that plays a key role in attention, perception, awareness, thought, memory, language, and consciousness. And finally, there are two other independent scientific research studies that identified what particular areas in the brain may be activated when we are using emotions of altruism, conducted through a couple of different experiments that highlighted these following areas in our brain: the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, that becomes activated through our working memory. However, it must be noted that both of these studies, research studies below, were motivated by giving money away. One of these studies, however, identified that money activated this area in our brain, the amygdala. This is the reason that money activates our ego emotions, and only extreme ego emotions can activate these fearful and aggressive emotions found in our brain, the amygdala. But neuroscience experts are still not sure where our advanced, highly evolved altruistic emotions can be located in areas in our brain. This is why a brand new team of neuroscience experts must begin new research studies to identify where some of our advanced, highly evolved altruistic emotions are located. Because it has come to my own attention that so far there has been no independent scientific research studies that provides valuable clues to these areas in our human brain that the emotions of altruism can be located. This is because, as we have already mentioned many times throughout this book, our brains are highly complex, and most brain functions rely on many different regions across the entire brain working in conjunction. However, it is still true that each lobe carries out the bulk of certain functions. But the exact location of where our highly evolved altruistic emotions become stored in our brain is not as important as how we develop the emotions of altruism in the first place. Because although, as mentioned earlier, I am not a neuroscience expert, it is my firm belief that emotions of altruism become triggered by our very early childhood authentic heart emotions that then cause a gut reaction. And this is the reason that it is my own firm belief that our altruistic emotions become stored into our long-term memories. But for many of us, they become suppressed throughout childhood through all of our different difficulties and struggles that many of us have to face unknowingly throughout childhood, including myself. This is the reason that, after practicing focused attention, mindful meditation for many years, I fully believe that it's possible that we can all begin to live through these brand new, positive and peaceful, heightened levels of emotional existence, only once we have begun to have the courage to acknowledge and to accept that our ego emotions have held back mankind's positive and peaceful emotional evolution for thousands of years. And second, only if we can find a brand new team of neuroscience experts that can help us all and invent for us all some effective, user-friendly practices that can focus our attention for long enough periods of time to distract our ego emotions and instead, together with certain priming techniques, allow our working memory to become activated through this complex process in our brains that neuroscience experts refer to as neuroplasticity, so that we can all begin these 3 levels of emotional adaptation. However, as you are about to discover, this is not the end of this brand new journey of emotional adaptation, because there is still one more ultimate level of emotional existence that we have still not yet discovered about ourselves. But this level is going to be a desired choice. This is the reason that we are now going to dedicate this final chapter discussing this final level through my own personal story of emotional adaptation, level 3.